Daf Yomi, tractate Shavuot, or Shevuos, page 8b, top of the page, close to that, a few words into the page with the words Amar Mar. Amar Mar Menayin Sheish Ba. Amar Mar Menayin Sheish Ba Yediya B'Tachil Levein Vayediya B'Sof Shesayed Zeh Toleh Menayin Mai Ka Sheleh. The Gemara cites the next part of the Braita. The master said, from where is it derived that if a person had awareness at the beginning but did not have awareness at the end, that this goat suspends the punishment that he deserved until he becomes aware of his transgression? The Gemara challenges, why does the Braita ask, from where is it derived? What is it that the Braita finds difficult about this, that it searches for a proof for it? Ma peshoim dilav b'nei korban, afchatoim nami dilav b'nei korban. Ema ma pishaim dilav b'nei korban le'olam, afchataim dilav b'nei korban le'olam, umayninu in ba yediya b'tchila v'yesh ba yediya b'sof. אבל יש בה ידיעה בתחילה ואין בה ידיעה בסוף, כיוון לכי מתיידע לבר קורבן הוא, אמה לא ליתלה. The Gemara explains, this is what the Braita finds difficult. Now that you have said that the goat atones only for sins that are similar to acts of rebellion, such that just as it atones for acts of rebellion that are not subject to atonement through an offering, so too it atones only for sins that are not subject to atonement through an offering. Why not compare them in a more restricted manner and say, just as it atones only for acts of rebellion that are never subject to atonement through an offering, so too it atones or suspends punishment only for sins that are never and will never be subject to atonement through an offering. And what types of transgressions are they? They are in cases where one did not have awareness at the beginning but did have awareness at the end. But where he had awareness at the beginning but did not have awareness at the end, since when he becomes aware, he is subject to an offering, one could say that the goat will not even suspend his punishment. And if you would say that the comparison should not be understood in this way, because for one who did not have awareness at the beginning, but did have awareness at the end, the goat whose blood presentation is performed outside the sanctuary, and Yom Kippur itself atone, that is difficult. If atonement is achieved through them, it is unnecessary for the verse to teach that atonement is not affected by the internal goat. Perforce, the comparison must be understood as the Braita presents it. What then is the difficulty of the Braita? Sol kedai techamina nepoch mebach, amar kra lechol chatoitam, lechol chatoisam, lechol chatotam, vikla al divine chataot nin. The Gemara explains, it could enter your mind to say that we should reverse our conclusions about which offering atones for which type of transgression. In other words, one could say that the internal goat atones for the sin of one who did not have awareness at the beginning, and the external goat atones for the sin of one who did have awareness at the beginning. If so, the The comparison could be fully extended, as the Gemara suggested, and accordingly, one could have thought that the internal goat would not atone for one who had awareness at the beginning. That the internal goat would not atone for one who had awareness at the beginning. To counter this, the verse states, for all of their sins, which indicates by inference that the internal goat atones only for those who are potentially liable to bring a sin offering, meaning the sliding scale offering, should they become aware of their sin. The Gemara challenges, but let one who is still not aware of his transgression achieve complete atonement, so that even should he later become aware of his transgression, he will not have to bring an offering. Why does the Brayta say that the goat only suspends the punishment? The Gemara answers, if it were written from their sins, I would have interpreted as you say. But now that it is written for all of their sins, this indicates it is referring to those sins whose commission will potentially cause the transgressor to become subject to an obligation to bring a sin offering. The Gemara asks, but once it had been determined that the goat does not affect complete atonement, to what end does it suspend punishment? Rabbi Zera said the Brayta means to say that if he dies before he brings his offering, he dies without liability for sin. Rava said to him, if he dies, he does not need the offering to atone for him, since death itself cleanses him of all his sins. Rather, Rava said there is a different explanation. The Brayta means to say that the goat serves to protect him from being punished with suffering before he has brought his offering. Ein b'yadia b'tchila v'yesh b'yadia b'asov. Zayir anas b'chutz v'yom ha'kippurim mechaber kolo. Kule. The Mishnah teaches for cases in which one did not have awareness at the beginning but had awareness at the end, the goat whose blood presentation is performed outside of the sanctuary, meaning the goat of the additional offerings of Yom Kippur and Yom Kippur itself atone. This is derived from the fact that the Torah juxtaposes the internal and external goats to teach that both atone only for cases in which one had awareness of his transgression at some point, although each offering atones in a different case. Mechde, let us see. Itakush lehadadi. ולחבר פנימי על ידי ועד חיצון ונפקא מינה ללכת עליו עד חיצון אבל כפרה אחת מכפר ואינו מכפר שתי כפרות. The Gemara comments now, the verse juxtaposes the two goats with each other to teach that they affect atonement for similar cases, but then let the internal goat atone both for itself, meaning for the cases that it normally atones for, and for that which the external goat normally atones for, and the practical difference will be in a case where for some reason the service of the external goat was not performed. The Gemara explains, the verse states, Aaron shall bring atonement upon its corners once a year. With the blood of the sin offering of atonement, once in the year, shall he make atonement for it throughout your generations. Exodus 30:10. The emphasis of the repeated term once teaches that the goat effects one atonement for only one case, but cannot affect two atonements for two different cases. To be continued. To be continued. The Gemara challenges, but then let the external goat atone for both itself, meaning for the cases that it normally atones for, and for that which the internal goat normally does atone for, and the practical difference will be in the case of the defiling of the temple or sacrificial foods that occurred between the offering of this goat and that goat. If it occurs after the internal goat's blood presentation, then the external goat will effect atonement for it. The Gemara explains the verse that states, Aaron shall bring atonement upon its corners once a year. Exodus 30, verse 10. The emphasis on the term once a year teaches that this atonement for the specific case that it atones for should be to be continued. To be continued, to be continued.